Hello everybody, welcome back to a Boy Time music video. I haven't done one in a long time, it feels like. I should have made this video like 2 weeks ago, but I'm going to be doing my top 10 albums for MIDYEAR 2020. Some of these albums I've reacted to or reviewed on the channel, but some other ones I have not, but I will link all the videos in the description. And let's just get into it. Number 10, I have Tame Impala with The Slow Rush. This was my first Tame Impala album that I listened to. This was like the first video that got any kind of views or reception for the channel, which is awesome. And I enjoyed it quite a bit on first reaction, if you've seen that video, because I was definitely not used to the sound, and I loved it. As you know, I've done, that kind of led me on a discovery thing with all the rest of the Tame Impala albums. And after that, I still like this album, but it's definitely not his best. There's not too much of an improvement from Currents, the 2015 album. So the 5-year wait, I can understand that people didn't see this as too much of a change, but I still really enjoyed tracks like One More Year, Posthumous Forgiveness, On Track, that kind of thing. Every once in a while I come back to this thing, but I definitely wouldn't choose it over Lonerism or Currents, but it's because it's kind of similar to Currents, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit. Number 9, we have Childish Gambino with 3:15:20. This was a very interesting release this year. I didn't cover this one on the channel because he had this weird thing like Sunday at like 2 a.m. He posted the album a week early in like a different order. I think it was really weird. And then the next Sunday after that, he released the official album. There are no song titles, barely any cover art. Only 2 songs have like actual titles, and the rest are just timestamps. And I think that was a big turnoff for people for this album because it was really hard to consume if you're not just consuming it like all at once. The first listen, I really liked it because of how out there and crazy it was. Few tracks I constantly have in rotation still, but there's a couple tracks that have really long openings or endings that don't match the song, so it's hard to listen to outside of album context. I think he went really, it's a bold move for him to kind of come out with this experimental of an album, especially when there's rumors of like this being his last one. He dropped it under the Donald Glover name, so maybe he's just going to be making music under that title now, I'm not sure. But time 12:38 with 21 Savage, what is it, 24:19, the 8-minute song. Really enjoyed those ones, as well as 47:48 and the last track 53:49. Those are the standouts for me. I really like the dynamic, like I really like how different all of the sounds are in this album. He doesn't stick with one area, he kind of bounces all over the place. Like 24:19, he goes kind of very Prince influenced, very slow, which I love. And then like the opposite, 53:49, kind of just an explosion of sound. Reminds me of Awaken My Love a little bit. But yeah, a very unique rollout, very unique sound. It's got mixed reception. I personally like it, but I have to listen to it pretty much all the way through. There's a few tracks I will without it, but yeah, definitely interesting. Number 8, I have Boldy James and The Alchemist, The Price of Tea in China. I feel like this album got overlooked a little bit. Unless, of course, you're talking about the limited edition vinyl that sells out in less than a minute. That's pretty much the only thing I've heard of this album this year. Yeah, really cinematic. Boldy James has kind of this kind of monotone delivery, but it works really well over Alchemist production. It's a very moody and cinematic album. It can be listened to in or out of order, like as singles. But 38 minutes, you get a really cinematic album. Great features from Vince Staples, Benny the Butcher, Freddy Gibbs, Evidence. I feel like people have been sleeping on this one a little bit, so if you're kind of into that alternate hip-hop, street hip-hop, definitely check this one out. Some of my favorites are Surf and Turf with Vince Staples, Scrape the Ball with Benny the Butcher, Snort with Freddy Gibbs, Speed Demon Freestyle. They recently just released a deluxe edition with Belvedere and Bernadine, so those are two of my favorites. Alright, number 7, I got Arm & Hammer with Shrines. This one came out recently. I'm still kind of digesting it and understanding it the more and more I listen to it, so I'm putting it at number 7 for now, but I think this thing could easily creep into my top 5 by the end of the year. If you don't know who Arm & Hammer is, a hip-hop duo from Billy Woods and Elucid, two very abstract rappers, but I think some of the best lyricists that are out right now. They make a great duo, and in this album, the production's kind of all over the place. These tracks don't flow into each other too much. There's a few of them that do, but the production's all over. But I think it makes really nice little single tracks that fit together into the album as a whole. Their subject matter kind of the same as what it usually is, but the way they kind of paint pictures and storytell and all these things it's nothing like I've ever heard from anyone else. They do it in such a unique way. It's kind of like in a super vague, but kind of you can understand a little bit of it. The more and more you listen to it, the more you kind of decipher it and really get into it. The cover art has to be like some of my favorite this year. It's a crazy cover. And they actually go into the story of the cover on the album, which is awesome. I picked that up on like my second listen, so it all kind of ties in. Yeah, Bitter Cassava, Pommel Horse, Leopards, King Tubby, Frida, Ramesses 2 with Earl Sweatshirt, More Mother and Fielded, Flavor Flav, War Stories. There's a ton of amazing tracks on here. And this can definitely be listened to just as singles instead of having to listen to the album all the way through. But yeah, fantastic abstract hip-hop. Still digesting it, but the things I have caught on to so far and things that I've researched, it's just kind of mind-blowing how they kind of make these verses so different from everybody else. Like Elucid has such a different flow and approach than like what you normally hear. If you're into like a Earl Sweatshirt, that kind of style, I would definitely recommend this. Alright, at number 6 I got Thundercat with It Is What It Is. This was one of my most anticipated from the year because I know he announced it in like January. But I think overall this is a pretty good improvement from Drunk. His songwriting has definitely improved. There are a few mixing issues that I've noticed, but I look over them. They're not too terrible. It's just it gets a little muddy sometimes with all of the instrumentation going on. But you know, Flying Lotus on production, great features from like Ty Dolla $ign has a great feature, Steve Lacy, Childish Gambino. Kind of what you'd expect from a Thundercat, very kind of jazz heavy. It's not as like silly and random as Drunk was. It's definitely more cohesive and flows really nicely as an album. But when you have songs like Dragon Ball Durag and then you know you have Fair Chance like a few songs down, the album starts out pretty spacey, goes into kind of like a happy what you'd expect from Thundercat, and then kind of dives down into a more serious tone, with like tributes to Mac Miller on the last 3 or 4 tracks. But really fantastic bass playing as always. Very soulful, very bassy, obviously. Some of my favorites are Interstellar Love, I Love Louis Cole, Funny Thing, Dragon Ball Durag is one of my favorite songs of the year. Fair Chance and the title track are all incredible. Alright, number 5, I have The Weeknd with After Hours. I love this thing a lot, like first reaction on this. Honestly, I haven't listened to it. It didn't get as much replay value out of me as I thought it was going to. Not to discredit the album at all, because I think the album played in order, just in one sitting, is fantastic. There's a few standout singles out of there that I really love, but for the most part, I haven't been listening to this too much, but the mood and the vibe this album sets, I think that's its main selling point, is you get this kind of 80s vibe with just very classic 80s synthesizers and grooves and everything, and it just takes it and expands upon every single aspect of it. You get the classic, very airy R&B from him as you go into the track list, but as a cohesive album, this thing's incredible. Standouts for me are Hardest to Love, Scared to Live, Escape from LA, Faith, Blinding Lights. Blinding Lights came out last year, but if it came out this year, it'd be one of my top songs of the year. Yeah, really nice, cohesive album. Definitely gonna return to form. I know some people didn't like Starboy and that kind of thing. I think this is definitely a return to form and an improvement. This is, for me, this is in top 2 for albums for him. I still think House of Balloons beats over this if you want to count that as an album, but commercial albums, I think this is his best. Just a great mix of like radio friendly hits and just it's a weird mix of like mainstream 80s and R&B in his way, and his voice is incredible, so he just goes well over everything. My number 4 and number 3 picks are very similar in that I like them both kind of equally, and they both scratch kind of the same kind of itch, but they're both fantastic in their own rights. So number 4, I have West Side Gun with Pray for Paris. This record was really my introduction into West Side Gun. I've heard him on other Griselda projects, but I haven't really dove into his solo catalog. But with this album, I saw this absolutely stacked feature list, and I was not disappointed, to say the least. Just very luxurious hip hop. Just every beat is glowing and fancy and great pianos and strings. I don't know if you can beat tracks like George Bondo and 327. You get features from obviously Conway, Benny, Tyler the Creator, Freddy Gibbs, Rocky Marciano, Boldy James. It's an incredible feature list. The album flows really well. I think this is definitely West Side Gun's best work from what I've heard. His other album that came out this year wasn't as good, but I don't think it was trying to be. Yeah, I didn't know he could rap this well. Like Eurostep and Versace, even Sean versus Flair, like him just rapping without anybody else, he definitely impressed me. I didn't realize he could do all that. I kind of thought that in Griselda he was kind of that guy to really set the tone, and kind of step aside for Conway and Benny, but he really held his own on this album. Production's fantastic. I know Derringer and Alchemist did a lot of the production work on here. Even Jay Versace did a song, and it's a fantastic instrumental. But yeah, just super luxurious, super replayable for me. Definitely looking forward to what him and Griselda do next. They've had a fantastic year so far on projects and features. Number 3 then is Freddy Gibbs and Alchemist with Alfredo. Again, luxurious street rap. It's Freddy Gibbs is on top of his game. He has to be, top 5 in the game right now. Maybe even I'd put him in top 3 personally. He has not missed at all. He's just album after album. I didn't expect an album out of him this quick after Bandana last year, but this definitely is different than Bandana and Pinata, his 2 most popular albums. This one is super string heavy. Alchemist went really heavy on the strings with this, and definitely more laid back. There are some hard hitting tracks like Frank Lucas and All Glass, but for the most part it's a little bit more laid back, which is awesome. Introspective, really introspective on a couple of tracks here. Like beats, the instrumental for something to rap about is something I've never heard. Like, how do you rap over that? Just super smooth guitar instrumental, and it's one of the best songs of the year. Freddie and Tyler's verse. And another thing I really like about this album is he gives his features a lot of room. Like when you get Benny and Tyler on back-to-back tracks, It's they each get like well over a minute for their verse. It's not like they just pop in and pop out. They really split the track in half, and it's great. Look at Me, then into Frank Lucas, then into Something to Rap About might be like the 3-track run, my personal favorite 3-track run of the year, because they all flow into each other and it's all just fantastic. Lyricism is on point, production's on point. It's short and concise, 35 minutes, which is awesome. There's no filler or anything on here. The closer, All Glass, like it goes kind of smooth into the end of the album after you, like once you get to Something to Rap About, but then it just knockout punch with All Glass to end it. Great work from him once again. I think he's just signed to a major label. Was it Warner or something? Right before this album came out, so I'm really excited to see what he does next. I know another Madlib album will be coming with him, but yeah, anything he puts out right now is just amazing. All right, my number 2 and number 1 spot, they can pretty much be interchangeable at this point. I love both of them about the same amount. And number 2, I'll put Mac Miller with Circles. This album came out in January. I gave it a 9 because it was my first review ever, and I was blown away by this thing, but I didn't know it would get better and better as I kept listening to it. Like, I'd put this as a 10 now. This album's been in constant rotation since it came out, and it's 6 months later. That rarely happens for me. And with like every track too. But this album is super like personal. It's like a therapeutic album. Obviously it's a posthumous release, and it was handled really well. Doesn't seem like a money grab at all. These are very genuine and human. Like, this is the most human album I've heard, if that makes sense. It's kind of weird, but just with like the intimate way they mixed his voice, so he's like super close. And even like, Mac isn't the best singer in the world, but I don't think it mattered just because of how genuine all of this came across. I knew once Good News came out, I was sure that this album would, be good. It wasn't just going to be a mix of like verses taken from every place and just slapped on some production like other posthumous releases have done. But this might be his best. Personally, this is his best album. Like, it sucks to say that because we won't be getting any more, and he was on such a good upswing creatively. But this is such a mature album to be coming from a 26-year-old. Like, it's actually insane. This sounds like something that could come from him, from someone that's twice his age. The way this album flows, just the production from John Bryan and all these strings and everything is just beautiful. The lyrics, super relatable, relevant, very personal, mature stuff. Even the deluxe edition, you got Right and Floating off of that. Those are just beautiful as well. And the production's phenomenal. Good News is probably my track of the year. Yeah, there's absolutely no complaints for this album at all. And this one could very well switch to number 1 by the end of the year. But like I said, they're neck and neck right now. And at number 1, I have Run the Jewels with the Run the Jewels 4. This is my most anticipated album of the year, and it delivered on every front. We got Yankee and the Brave and Ooh La La as singles a few months beforehand. I think this was supposed to come out in like March initially or something, before COVID and everything. But as soon as I heard those 2 singles, I knew the album was going to be great, but it still surpassed my expectations somehow. The sonic direction here of like the kind of old school 90s type production mixed with modern day and futuristic, typical LP futuristic dystopian production just worked so well together. Like, they put Yankee and the Brave and Ooh La La as the first track, so obviously I kind of knew. I've listened to those songs 50 times over, but the way this album flows is phenomenal. Like Ooh La La and Out of Sight, it's a non-stop just the salt on your ears, basically. But the production's fantastic, but the lyrics are just the most relevant, the most hard-hitting out of every album I've listened to this year. Somehow, every single time these guys release an album, it is just right on time, right where it needs to be. The US was going through, COVID, so everybody was already, like, freaking out on edge, and then, sparking of protests and everything, and this came out as, like, the anthem of protests. Perfect protest music, but also just, like, overall. If Circles was the album to keep me calm this year, this album definitely scratched the itch of just being angry, being, upset with the system and everything else. It was perfect timing. LP and Killer Mike probably give their best performance lyrically on this thing as well, on any RTJ album. Just the verses are, very tight, I can tell they took their time with them. Like, every single thing is thought out. There's no filler lines, there's no filler anything here. Just amazing verses from two veterans. They have a good mix of just straight up bangers and politically and socially charged tracks, introspective tracks. Like, tracks like Out of Sight, Goonies vs. E.T., Walking in the Snow, Just with Pharrell Williams and Zach De La Rocha, Pulling the Pin. I could literally list every track as my favorite track. Yeah, that's my top 10 for the year, or mid-year, I guess. We'll see what else comes out this year. I know Logic has his final album apparently coming out soon, so I'll be reacting to that. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm feeling really good about this year music-wise. It's been an awful, awful year, but these albums have, kind of held me down. Thank you for watching. I know I haven't been uploading as much. I'm finally kind of getting back into it. We're streaming a lot more on Twitch now. I'll put that in the description as well. That's kind of what's been taking up our time. I've just been enjoying that more. I will see you next time. Logic reaction probably next. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Peace.